Hey guys, this is Steve Huff from SteveHuffPhoto.com. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to take a closer look at the Leica Q2. Alright, so if you want to see the full written review, check out SteveHuffPhoto.com. It is over there, it's live, it's been up for a few days. The Leica Q2 is a camera I've had here for about 3 weeks or so. I've been using it. I've extensively used the original Q. And at the end of the day, after using it for 3 weeks, the basic upgrades from the Q to the Q2 are the sensor and the battery. Those are the basic upgrades to the camera. It's also weather sealed. But the battery is now taken from the Leica SL. And the Leica SL is a beautiful camera, one of my all-time favorite cameras, in my top 3, probably top 2 cameras of all time for me. I love the Leica SL, I love the build, I love the feel, I love the controls, I love the simplicity, I love using it with Leica M lenses. The SL right here, I love this camera and I've loved it for 4 years now, or however long it's been out. I've loved it since the day it came out. It's just a beautiful camera. I love the file quality of that 24 megapixel sensor. While it's not the best in lowest of light, it has this richness to the files, to the quality of the files that I love. And even at 4 years, I think it's been 4 years since the SL has come out, I still love the camera. And this battery right here is the same battery that is now used in the Leica Q2. With this battery, you're going to get a much longer life out of your Q2 on a day-to-day basis. I charged the battery, I've used it for 2 or 3 days, and I didn't have to recharge or replace the battery. I remember the old battery would run out a lot quicker. So that's one main improvement on the Q2. The other change is the sensor. The original Q had a 24 megapixel sensor, much like the Leica SL. The new Q2 has a 47 megapixel sensor. So for you pixel peepers, those of you who like to crop, those who want maximum resolution, it is you who are going to love the new sensor of the Q, that maximum resolution crowd. But if you're into shooting in really low light, you may be a little disappointed in the Q2. The low light capability suffers a little bit from the original Q, and it's not up there with cameras like the Sony a7 III, a7R III, a9. I took this out to one of my local favorite hotspots for shooting local music, and it's a very low light club. It's called the Lost Leaf. It's in Central Phoenix, and they basically have a light from above. It consists of like a red light. It's very dim, it's very dark in there, and it presents a challenge to every single camera I take in this venue. Cameras that have passed the test, Sony a9, especially Sony a7 III, the Hasselblad X1D. I also have shot the Leica SL in there with some success, the M10 with some success. Canon 1D X2 is amazing in this venue. But other cameras seem to suffer and have a harder time. Cameras like anything micro four thirds. This Leica Q2 kind of was very, very challenging to get any shots I liked, because after you go past ISO 6400, the noise would creep up. And I also had a hard time taming these reds in this venue with this camera. So it wasn't my favorite camera for ultra low light. Here you can see a series of ISO tests taken with the Q2, starting at 6400, which is where it starts to get really noisy, all the way up to ISO 50,000. Keep in mind this was taken at night on a street. There were a couple lamps outside and a street light as well, so it wasn't pitch blackness. So the Q2 is also weather sealed. It's very tough, it's very rugged. It feels almost like a mini M camera, though it's not mini in size. It doesn't feel as substantial as an M with something like a 28 Summilux would, but it still feels very good in the hand. This camera would excel for street photography, for environmental portraits, for an everyday walk around, for vacation cameras, trips, travel. That's the kind of duty the Q2 would take on with ease. It's not an action camera, so it's not for shooting sports. It's not a really low light camera, so it's not for shooting low light. I took a couple of images here with the Q2 and the Sony RX1 R2 to see the differences. And here, as you can see, the Leica has more color pop, a little more bitingness to it, like sharpness to it, crispness, where the Sony is a little softer and mellow. Not really softer in the image, just the way it renders the image. It looks gentler, right? There's a different look to the images that come out of these cameras. Now, I've read some say that the Jpegs of the Leica are awful, and I found that to be the case if shooting at high ISO. The camera seems to put on some aggressive kind of noise removal or reduction, and I never like using NR, noise reduction, in camera because it always obliterates any detail or sharpness you have. But JPEGs in everyday situations, I felt they looked fantastic. I'll throw some up on the screen here. Now, shooting RAW is always going to be where you get the most out of each camera, and when you're spending $5,000 on a Leica Q2, you should probably shoot RAW to get the most from it. Another feature of this camera and the original Q is the in-body crop modes. Now, it comes extra in handy here because you have 47 megapixels to work with. That gives you cropping power. So you can basically press this button right here, and every time you press it, frame lines come up for 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter, 75 millimeter. And yes, you can crop in post-production, which everybody's going to say, but it makes it cool to do so in camera because it allows you to frame at these focal lengths. You can frame at 35, you can frame at 50, you can frame at 75, but beware, by the time you get to 75 millimeters, you're working with a 7 megapixel file. It's not like shooting a 35, 50, and 70 millimeter lens. Your bokeh is not going to be any different. You're still going to get the depth of field of a 28 f1.7, as that's what this lens is. This is a Summilux 28 millimeter f1.7 lens. When you go into macro, as you can see right here, you can switch the lens easily into macro mode. And when you do that and you get up close to your subject, the lens will automatically stop down to f2.8. You cannot shoot wide open up close. This is by design. Leica implemented that to keep the quality of the file when you're up close. So the Leica Q2 is not a huge evolution over the Q1. Again, you're getting a 47 versus 24 megapixel sensor, but you're losing a little bit of high ISO capability. It's not as good. That's why I kind of wished Leica would have kept a 24 megapixel sensor and just improved on that. I feel 24 megapixel is the sweet spot. You can print huge with it. You get plenty of detail because to me, photography is not about pixel peeping. It's about taking the image, right? Sharpness doesn't make a photo. An artist does. The photographer does. We don't need every eyelash to be crisp and in major detail, because when someone's looking at a print, they don't look at that. They're looking at the image as a whole. So I feel I would have liked to have seen the same 24 megapixel resolution and just improved in low light and dynamic range. But here we have it. We have a 47 megapixel sensor for those who want that resolution, detail, and cropping power. You have an improved Evf and Oled Evf, an improved touch LCD on the back, a little bit of refinement in the handling, and the same lens as the Q1. Are those upgrades worth it to you? This camera comes in at just under $5,000. You can snag an original Leica QP, which is a very attractive version of the Q, for around $3,800 or so new. But again, you have to go with what you want. So I enjoyed my time with the Leica Q2. It's for those of you who want an everyday carry camera, one that you can take with you everywhere, one that's fast. The autofocus is fast. It's about as fast as the Q1, which was pretty quick. There's no complaints there on the autofocus. So again, you're just getting the sensor and battery weather seal improvements within the Q2. Image quality looks great. It does look a little different to me than the original Q, but it still looks fantastic. And if you're shooting outdoor in daylight and you have enough light, the images are going to be beautiful in color and depth, right? You're going to get great dynamic range and color out of this sensor. So the Leica Q2 is here. It's an interesting camera. For $5,000, you can buy 3 Fuji X100s, whatever the recent model is. You can buy a Sony a7 III and a great lens. You can buy almost a Leica SL. Now, as I showed you earlier, I love the SL. That's a beautiful camera to me. It just has a richness to the files. Many years after its release, it's still one of my favorites, and there's nothing like the feel of it when shooting with an M lens, in my opinion. Now, the Panasonic S1 and S1R are coming out, and I feel those are going to kind of be the basis for the Leica SL2 whenever that comes out. I do feel the SL2 will carry over that 47 megapixel sensor. I think I'll be happy keeping the original for me, but for those of you who are into higher resolution, I think 47 megapixels is starting to push the limits of a 35 millimeter sensor. But anyway, it's all good. All cameras today are beautiful. All cameras today are better than 95% of us. Pick your poison, pick what you love, pick what drives you, pick what motivates you to get out and shoot, right? So this was my look at the Leica Q2. It's not a huge upgrade over the Q, but it has some improvements that some of you may enjoy. It's also compatible with the Leica Photos app. Don't forget about that. You can wirelessly send your images in real time to your phone as you take them. That's a cool feature to have if you want to share them instantly on Instagram or social media. So that's about all. That's my thoughts on the Q2. I will see you guys next time. If you like what I do, thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll be back. Bye.